Greetings, I'm Caffeine Rage and welcome back to the Sunday Sampler. This week we're going to be taking a look at Sweet Volley High. Sweet Volley High is a Yuri / Otome visual novel self-published by NewWestGames, a Canadian developer, and this is actually originally written in English. And I'm also trying something a little bit different with this video to avoid stumbling through so much text and trying to still get my thoughts out. The video that you're seeing is actually done separate from my voice right now. So there's not going to be really any connection between my voice and the video shown. Just think of it as more just seeing what the writing actually looks like and how the art is in the game. So there you go. So let's go ahead and just dive straight into the story side of the game. In this game, you play as Aya Mizuki, a girl that's just kind of drifting along without any real goals. She's a member of the volleyball club, but ends up never really playing because she just likes the drive to really improve herself, and she honestly really isn't needed in the team, so most evenings she's just warming the bench for the volleyball club. Content with that, she just really is on her own, reading and really doing her own thing. That's until tragedy strikes and she's forced to really change her life, and a summer with her grandfather changes that as well. I feel like she's a pretty believable character. She's fairly quiet and keeps to herself in the beginning of the story, but she progresses and makes a lot of progress actually in a very short time as she gains friends and becomes more outgoing and comfortable in the crowd. I found myself liking her and enjoyed seeing her growth as she went throughout her senior year of high school and into her life beyond, even if things felt a bit compacted at times. Now, what do I mean by compacted? The game itself has a time span of roughly a year and a half well, at least in the route I've read. And while this makes it sound like the game's going to be very long, it actually isn't. And that's because it does a lot of time skips, which really takes a lot of the beat out of the story. While we don't need a day-to-day breakdown of everything she does and all her training, everything that happens between Aya and the girls on the volleyball team and the boys she meets, her prospective love interests to all of them. One time skip says that she became closer with all of them, and it doesn't really go into how. Skipping her pretty much entire senior year and really breaking the principle of show, don't tell in writing. I would have much rather seen just cut out a route and make the others more fleshed out, as well as the fleshing out the prologue and taking out some of these absolutely major time skips. While some of them are just a week or 2 weeks long, the one I'm talking about that really kind of made me notice them and just how they were kind of hurting the story a bit was her entire senior year pretty much. So yeah, that's something that I really wish they would have done a little bit differently. That's not to say I dislike the story itself. I just felt like, it was more like a highlights or more of just a synopsis of what happened and not the complete story. Overall, the story I read was Nunami's route. It took me about 3.5 hours to complete, and 2 of those hours was actually in the prologue before the game offers its branching points to go off into the different routes. Now this puts the game, I would say, probably in the ballpark of the 5 to 7 hour range. That is assuming, of course, the player doesn't go back and reread the prologue every single time. For a budget title, that's actually not bad. It's not great, but it's not a bad length, even though, the story is lessened a bit by its time skips. So, and I don't know if the other routes have those major time skips as well, but I do know that the one that I was talking about previously is actually in the prologue, so that is in the shared route. And also something else to keep in mind is that the stories are fairly kinetic. Now what this means is that you don't really have a lot of choice in these stories. In the story I've read, I had 3 choices, and 2 of those was actually getting me on my route. This isn't a positive or a negative, this is more of just a warning because some visual novels are a lot more interactive than this, so this is something just to keep in mind if you're looking for something a little bit more interactive than what Sweet Volley High is actually giving. So let's go ahead and switch over to the audio side of things and talk about the music and the voice acting. Yes, there is voice acting in this, and I'll get to that in a moment. The music is nice and atmospheric. It does a pretty good job of just drifting off to the background, but still punctuating the current mood of the story and the scenes without being too over the top. I found it rather well done without it being overly done. Now, let's get to the voice acting, because depending on where I am in just the B-roll footage of the video, you may or may not have heard the voice acting just yet, and I'm pretty sure that will actually show up in this. At least I think it will. If not, I'll do some editing to make sure that there's at least a little bit of voice acting in this. The game is partly voiced, with the more important scenes getting a voice treatment for everyone except Aya. She's a silent protagonist in this. And the voice acting, when it does show up, really brings out the characters and makes them come to life. And combined with the music, really drives home the current mood of the scene, particularly a couple of scenes in the story I read, but I'm not going to spoil that. This is a first impressions and not a review, and because the stories are so short, I don't want to ruin too much beyond what's in the prologue. And even the prologue, I'm keeping into about the first half of the prologue, except for that time skip. That's actually right near the branching point, but that's more of just a little bit of a warning. Outside of the important scenes, there's still a little bit of voice acting, but it's typically limited to either a single word or just a single line. And honestly, this makes it feel more like the voice acting, the lack of voice acting in the scenes outside of the key scenes is more of a budget constraint rather than a design choice. And that the lines outside of these key scenes are more of leftovers from a game that was planned to be fully voice acted. Now, granted, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but that's just what it kind of feels like. And also, it's a little bit jarring just to be reading along and suddenly have the characters talk for a word or maybe a sentence. Just a little bit jarring, especially when it's something like hello. It's just weird. So, art-wise, as you've seen, the game does a pretty good job of showing off its various characters. There's only really a handful of sprites, and they're limited to the primary cast. So, but once again, like I mentioned before, this is a budget title, so the limited art and reusing of art assets, particularly a certain location, I can understand why they're doing it. And the characters are well drawn, and nothing really jumped out at me that took me out of the experience. Now, since we're talking about the art, let's talk about the censorship as well, since it kind of ties in. The Steam version of the game is censored. Any adult image that you happen to come upon in the censored version will have light bars on it, or lens flares to obscure the naughty bits. But the Steam forums also contains a content restoration pack provided by the developers. So if you wish to have the naughty bits restored, you could do so, and that also restores the sex scenes, which in the censored version of the game are just happens off screen, fade to black. Now, I will warn you that they are rather explicit. So if you're a prude, or you don't want to have the see them bumping nasty, then you're okay to not put in the content restoration pack. You're not really missing any story. There's in the route that I read, it was more just extra bits, if you pardon the phrasing there, than really any story progression. So you're not going to be missing anything if you omit the restoration pack, other than some naughty bits. So let's wrap things up with a couple small bugbears I had with the game on the technical side of things. For one, the menu loads very, very slowly. Sliding in from the sides of the screen. If you go back to the very, very beginning of the video, you'll see all the buttons come in from the sides. That's not me being artistic. That's how the menus load. And that's also what happens when you open a menu and try to navigate through it. It makes saving and loading games very annoying, just because you have to wait several seconds to... First, you have to wait for the save button to come out. Then you hit save. Then you wait for the save slots to come out. Then you hit the save there. It's a bit of an annoyance, and it really shouldn't be there. And also, one other thing is I'm questioning the omission of the gallery to view artwork and possibly scenes that you've already played out. It is a very, very basic feature in visual novels, and its absence is a bit puzzling. I really don't know why it's not included, unless the censorship patch just causes issues with it, or, where they had to censor it, just made it so it didn't work correctly. I'm not sure if that's the case or not. It's just one of those things that has me just puzzled. So let's go ahead and just wrap things up. I do think Sweet Volley High is a pretty good budget visual novel, and it's a good jumping in point for someone that is curious about visual novels and they've played a couple and want to see what the ones on Steam has to offer. While I do have my problems with the story and a couple technical issues, it may just come down to personal taste more than anything else. So take what I say with a massive grain of salt there. But overall, I thought it was a pretty good story, even if it felt a little bit more of highlighty than actual complete story. That's, like I said, it may just be me. So if you're looking to get into the visual novel genre, this may be one to check out. And it's not a bad place to start. Veterans of the genre may find it a little bit light, particularly because it's so short and lacking the gallery, and like I said, cutting out what felt like could have been another hour of content as her and her teammates learn to get along, because they go from not really enjoying the company of one another to being best of friends really quickly. But it's still rather enjoyable, and it's a cheap read at $9.99. Check it out if you're interested in Sweet Volley High. And I'm, speaking of checking things out, I also have other content on this channel. Yes, it's time for the outro. If you wish to check that out, feel free to do so. I have 3 Let's Play series, the Sunday Sampler, which you've just finished watching, and my podcast that comes out on Fridays. And also, feedback is greatly appreciated, particularly for this video, because this is a very, very different style from all my other Sunday samplers. So I'm interested to see if there's any feedback for this. And I have gotten a few visual novels, and I've struggled on just how to deal with them, because there's just no way for me to read and give my thoughts for the game. So this is my compromise for the situation, and just trying out something different with the Sunday Sampler. So that wraps up the Sunday Sampler this time. Thank you for watching, and we'll be sampling something next time. Until then, I'll see ya.